welcome to Classical Schmassical, the anti-classical classical music podcast. Tune in every Saturday as we discuss, deconstruct, and dissect what it means to be a musician in the modern world. I'm your host, Alexa Laterno. I use any pronouns, and our guest this week is Connor Johnson.
Hi, I'm Connor. I'm a trumpet player and composer from Michigan. I'm currently finishing up my undergrad at Michigan State University, where I've really grown to love playing and writing new music, and I'm hoping to continue my experimental endeavors in the fall for a master's in composition and trumpet performance, although I'm not sure quite where yet.
Awesome, yeah. Thanks so much for coming on. I'm really excited for our conversation today. So we met through Z Festival last summer when you were playing one of my pieces and writing that piece, especially in the trumpet part. So it was for bass, trumpet, and soprano voice. And especially with the trumpet part, it was a big inspiring force in starting this podcast because I had really no idea what I was doing. I had no knowledge of brass rating. I had written for a couple wind ensemble, a couple orchestra pieces, but outside of that, never a brass in a chamber setting, and certainly never a brass solo. And I was having a lot of trouble finding like information on extended techniques or modern brass rep on what a trumpet can do and do effectively. So I'm curious to start out, what are some things that you think people, especially composers, get wrong about the trumpet?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things. But for me, one of the biggest ones is that mutes aren't just for volume. When people hear the word mute, they immediately think, well, that makes it quiet. And there are a couple mutes that make it quiet. But for the most part, a lot of our mutes are just changing the timbre and doing fun effects like the Harmon mute with the stem, where you can do the wah-wah effect. And it's sort of like the plunger mute, but a little less gnarly. It's a little more metallic.
Sure.
Or the cup mute, which just gives it a really soft covered timbre, but you can still play loud. One of my personal favorites that doesn't get called for nearly enough, the solo tone or clear tone mute, which gives you kind of that 1920s-ish sound, where it's cool. really, really nasally and kind of schmaltzy. So that's really fun. Mutes are one of the big things.
Yeah, I never, I was talking to my composition teacher about this, but I never ever think about writing for mutes. I'm always just like, oh yeah, brass, so fun. But then there's all these different sounds that you guys could do and just stick a thing in, and wow. It just never comes into my head.
Well, and there are times when mutes are used poorly as well, like when they're
sure.
only used for the volume part, or when you have ridiculously fast mute changes. But for the most part, they're a lot of fun and let you get some really neat sounds.
Yeah.
Another thing that I find, it's not necessarily something people get wrong, but just don't take full advantage of, is that we can play really technical stuff on the trumpet, as long as it's in our good, comfortable money register. So there are issues with some ranges, so low notes, if you're way below the staff, everything down there has a whole lot of fingers down, and all those technical licks are super awkward.
Sure.
And in the high register, all the partials get so close together that you barely have any fingers down, and your accuracy suffers, because it's really easy to just play completely a different note than you were aiming for, because so many notes up there have the same fingering. So that money register is like everything in the staff, and then just a little bit outside it on either end. But anything in there, as long as it's in a nice key, or people who are used to playing all sorts of new things, or especially if you can find a Broadway player who can play in 6 sharps, because that's the key that the arranger decided it really just needed to be in to have the right sound in the vocals. If you can find one of those people, they can handle something in a bad key that's technical too. But for the most part, as long as it's in a nice key and it's in the middle of the staff, we can pretty much do anything.
So is that sort of kind of in the staff and a little bit on either side, notated? Is that the same for no matter what horn you're using, or does it shift?
Yeah, as long as it's notated, because we all our instruments have the same fingering when they're transposed.
Okay.
So as long as you've transposed correctly and are working with written pitch.
Guilty.
It all comes out the same.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
And then speaking of different horns, that was actually the last thing that I had in mind, was that the smaller the horn that you're playing, the smaller the group you can blend with. And it's not a super strict rule. Like, there are still times when a trumpet is not going to blend with any ensemble, regardless of what horn they're playing.
Sure.
But just in general, like, if I'm playing in a chamber ensemble, sometimes even brass quintet, but really groups with other instruments, I feel way more comfortable playing a small horn like C or E flat than I do playing the big B flat trumpet.
Yeah. That's really good to know. It's like, I know I originally, for the piece that I was writing for you, I originally had it in B flat, and then genuinely I ran out of time when I was engraving it. I had this beautiful score, and then realized that I had like the show in concert pitch button still checked, and I unchecked it, and all of the editing got mixed up, and I was really, really short on time. The piece was due in like half an hour, and I went, cool, so we're using C trumpet because my engraving will still work. And so, like, you know, it worked out because it was a trio.
Well, the good news is between the C and the B flat, it's not a whole lot different going between the two instruments,
Yeah.
for me at least. Although if you were writing a piccolo trumpet part and forgot to transpose and gave it to me on C trumpet, I would be a little bit upset.
Easy.
But I would probably still transpose it and do it on piccolo trumpet, because that's our job, is to not really care about what instrument is on the page and what the composer thinks we're supposed to be playing. Is we just do it whatever makes the part easiest. And,
that's totally
and
fair.
kind of just hand wave. There's a great story where someone, I feel like it was a story from a pit. It might have been West Side Story. There's a D trumpet bit in there. Because
did not know that was a thing.
Yeah, so there's in the mambo, actually, the big solo in the mambo is on
yeah.
D trumpet, because some pit players, opera players, particularly, that were doing a version of it at one point, don't like high notes, not their thing, so that turned into a D trumpet part. And I don't know if that's because of somebody who really preferred the D trumpet over anything else, or if someone said, just give us something smaller and easier. But that became a thing. And I heard a story where someone was playing it in a pit, and the conductor said, isn't this supposed to be on D trumpet? And they go, yeah, sure, I'll try that right away. So they put their horn down and rummage around in their case and pick their horn back up and put their mouthpiece back in it and play the part, and the conductor says, perfect.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Pit orchestras are wild. I did pit for Secret Garden once. That in the part that I was given, there were 18 different instruments in it.
That is absurd.
Yeah, I brought in 5 and I made do. But like transposing in my head to the F sharp tin whistle part was just like, oh god.
Yeah, we don't. I mean, there are times when I will follow what's on the page. If you give me something for piccolo trumpet, I'm gonna do it and just deal with the transposing. But like. Is a D trumpet going to sound that much different than a C trumpet? If it's written in a good range for both, is a B flat going to sound that much different than a C? As long as it's not like in a section.
Sure.
You don't want to mix everyone on different keyed instruments unless you have to.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that's an effect. That's a choice. Yeah, I'm always baffled by just the amount of options you have. And I really wish that we could just say, no, this is too high to play on flute. I'm just going to switch to piccolo. But, like, composers get mad when we do that. Yeah.
It's all about the sound.
It's all about the sound. And, like, yeah, to be fair, like, the different flutes sound very different. But, like, and also they're just criminally, the low flutes are criminally underused. But that's a whole other conversation. I'll get off my soapbox about that, but I just think that bass flute is maybe the most undervalued instrument that exists. So, like, back into trumpet land things, can you talk about some of your favorite, like, extended techniques that are available to use?
Yeah, extended technique is kind of a funny thing on trumpet. With low brass and horn, multiphonics are a thing that are a little bit more established. There's horn repertoire that has horn chords, or multiphonics, written in, where you're singing one part, playing another, and even sometimes getting a resultant tone to be playing a 3 or 4 note chord by yourself, which is super cool. It's much easier on the low brass instruments because of their range and the construction of the instrument. And same thing with pedal tones, where those are something that are just, they're not even an extended technique on low brass because of the instrument's construction. They're physically present as real notes on the instrument.
Right,
but
right.
The trumpet, being this weird little tiny thing, has some limitations. So multiphonics are super difficult. It might be my favorite extended technique, but I can't do them yet. It's a work in progress for sure. Although, if you want to hear some amazing multiphonics on the trumpet, check out Rex Richardson. He's a soloist in both classical and jazz realms.
Okay.
A little bit of a composer on the side.
So
just kind of does his own thing and does it very well. He wrote a great piece, I think it's called 016 Fantasy. I'm not sure if that's like a set theory thing or if it was like the 16th piece he wrote, or I don't think it's explained anywhere, but it starts off with this crazy multiphonics cadenza where he's like shifting the sung note while holding a played note still, or holding the sung note and moving the played one around, or moving both together. And it's really amazing.
That's so cool.
And he'll improvise cadenzas in other people's pieces all the time and do the multiphonics. And they'll ask him too, because they know he can do it. So when people write for him, there's always a bit where it's multiphonics cadenza here, or ad-lib cadenza, maybe some multiphonics. And
I love that.
He always nails it. So
I hope to one day have a brand like that.
Yeah, me too. I hope one day just to be able to do the multiphonics and play that stuff.
Yeah.
So I have to start somewhere.
Yeah, definitely.
Aside from that, probably the best extended technique on trumpet, in my opinion, at least in terms of a balance of easy to play and a fantastic sounding effect, is just disassembling the instrument.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So when you can take the slides out of the trumpet and it still makes sound.
Okay.
Because of the construction of the horn, the tuning slide goes into the third valve, which has its own tuning slide to adjust just that valve, and then the piping runs backward through the valves till it gets to the first valve, and then comes out the bell.
Wild.
So, for example, if you were to remove the first slide, you could adjust the pitch as normal with the other two valves and still have all those pitches available.
Oh.
But if you press the first valve down, the sound comes out of the tubing with the slide where the slide is removed instead of coming out the bell. And you get this really weird echo effect, and it turns the trumpet from this beautifully crafted resonator that has the harmonic series functioning as intended and something that is constructed with intent,
Right.
into an absolute roll of the dice, blowing through a tube that wasn't meant to be blown through. And it's the coolest thing. You can slide all over between pitches. There's not really slots like there are because the trumpet just follows the harmonic series like other brass instruments. It's really just a bugle, and then you push the valves down to get bugles in different keys, sort of.
Yeah.
But this doesn't really have a harmonic series when you do this.
Right.
Or if there is, it's not really super present, and you just get assorted pitches that really slot, and then you can slide all over the place between them and get these kind of non-sounds. So it's very weird.
So fun.
And this is actually something that there's several pieces in our repertoire that really take advantage of.
Oh, cool.
The seminal work for unaccompanied trumpet Solace by Stanley Friedman. The first three movements are relatively normal. They're normal by 20th century standards.
Sure. Yeah.
The third movement's got a bit where you like scream and knock your stand over in anger and then go back to playing like normal.
I mean, we've all done
that's
that in
fine.
a practice room anyways. Might as well put it on stage.
Yeah. But the fourth movement, you take out actually the second slide, not the first, I believe, for the entire duration of the movement.
Mm-hmm.
And you use it to do all sorts of really cool effects.
Nice.
Where you're echoing. It's like it starts with a fanfare, so you play the fanfare, and then it's written very carefully to use the pitches that you can produce comfortably with that kind of fake instrument where you hold down the valve that doesn't have a slide in it. So you can play the same music with and without the without that valve pressed down, and you can do an echo where you're playing the same thing, but it comes out that little tiny port and is much softer and has a totally different timbre.
That's so fun.
It's just a lot. It's just a lot of fun. I just wrote a piece last summer that I haven't gotten around to recording yet because it's long and complicated and uses every single mute I have as well as doing the no slide thing. As I said, mutes are fun. And it's just been, it was so fun playing around with it and figuring out what I could do. And
I love that.
Quarter tones aren't normally something that you'd expect to be able to do on the trumpet easily, but when you are playing in kind of no man's land without real notes, quarter tones are easy. You just lip it and turn it into whatever note you feel like it being.
That's so cool.
And actually, it's in. I don't remember if I found out about the effect first through Solus or through one of my absolute favorite trumpet concertos of all time, Larry Batensky's "Awake You Sleepers." Mm-hmm. It's a great piece. It's a concerto loosely based on shofar calls.
Okay.
So in the beginning of the piece, you're playing the call. Each movement's based on a different one, and in the beginning of the piece, you're playing one of the calls by just doing glissandes and half valving, to get that smooth slide, but with the instrument fully intact. And same with the second. Each movement starts with the call that it's based on. But in the big cadenza that ends the third movement, you play some really fast, flashy stuff, and then it says, "Quick, remove second slide." And the first time I got to this, I was like, well, that's strange. I'm not quite sure what we're going for here. But I did it and tried it out, and you play the calls, all of them, without the slide in. So you're playing this, like, primitive, like, unrefined tube that makes loud sounds. So it's not beautifully constructed. It's like you're playing a natural instrument.
I love that.
And it's just the coolest thing.
That's so cool.
It's a fantastic effect. And so that may be my favorite extended technique. And there are more. More that I can't do because they're difficult. So I actually mentioned with that pedal tones being easier when you take out that second slide, and like kind of giving you access to that range because of the whole physics not helping you or hurting you really. Some people have figured out how to produce pedal tones very accurately and well enough that you can use them in a piece of music and have it sound like real notes.
Nice.
I'm working on it, just to have it there if I ever want to. It's not quite where I'd be ready to put it on stage yet, but some people have figured out how to access like an extremely low register, like going into the trombone or even tuba range.
Oh wow!
On a trumpet, and it's bizarre. I've watched videos of people doing that stuff, and every time I just look at it and say, there's no way that's coming out of the trumpet.
Right. Secret tuba backstage.
Yeah. It feels like it sometimes.
That's so cool.
And then we can also do like anything that, all sorts of vocal sounds and all that. There's a great piece by Robert Erickson called Krill, where you have to do all sorts of like sharp inhales. You're breathing out, but not actually playing. You're doing air sounds through the instrument, like slap tonguing, where you kind of and pop your tongue against the mouthpiece, and you, sort of like slap tonguing on a woodwind, but not quite as effective.
Yeah,
it's an odd sound.
Yeah,
but it's there. There's all sorts of things like that. We can unscrew our valve caps to make them really clicky while we're playing, and there's a piece that does that really nicely. It's supposed to be like a wind-up toy.
Oh, cool.
And you like speed it. You just do trills without actually playing a note. You're just blowing air and making the clicks and play with the speed of it, or play patterns where the clicks make a polyrhythm with what you're playing with the actual notes.
So fun.
it's wild, and that's something that I haven't put the time into constructing anything like that myself, because figuring out where do I do, like, what alternate fingering lets me have this valve click at exactly the right time in the pattern. And
Yeah. I wish that, like, I didn't play such a, like, very carefully put together instrument, because I want to just take it apart and see what happens. But also, like, oh, that would be so much money to get somebody else to put it back together. There's too many parts. Woodwinds, just why? There's so much going on there.
you can't just take a whole joint off.
I mean, yeah, it's true. Like, we've got, like, head joint things. We can, like, play it as a slide whistle, or, like, you can buzz into just the body and foot joint, and it makes, like a really, like, it almost sounds like a really bad clarinetist.
I actually have never, I don't know if I've ever seen that before.
Oh my gosh, it's the coolest thing. But yeah, you just, like, play into the body as if you were playing a brass instrument, and out comes this terrible clarinet, and it's a time. But no, I love just being able to mess around and play with it like that. That's such cool techniques.
Yeah, it's fun because we're all kind of in undiscovered territory with this stuff. Trumpet extended technique I mean, all trumpet repertoire for the most part is comparatively new. With our modern instruments that we use today aren't nearly as old as, like, string instruments. I'm not sure how old the flute is, but
not particularly new.
Yeah,
not as old as strings, but not particularly new.
But then all, in the whole lifespan of the trumpet, all this is even more recent, and so there's a lot that we don't know that we can do, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And there are some people, like, really pushing the edge, and they're making music with the trumpet that doesn't even have, like, notes in it. It's all the air sounds and split tones where you're intentionally causing your lips to, like, vibrate at different frequencies to give you almost a multiphonic, but it sounds a little bit different than a singing multiphonic, where you have, like, a clear played sound and then also a distinct sung pitch. The split tones are a little bit nastier and uncontrollable. So there's people making music that's just all that, and those crazy double pedal tones that are all the way in the bottom of the bass clef.
Oh my god!
There's people just doing that, and that's all they do is this crazy stuff that doesn't have anything resembling what you'd expect a trumpet to sound like. So we're still experimenting.
Yeah, that's so great. So kind of going off of that, like, what are some pieces or composers that you think use the trumpet super, super effectively?
The first thing that comes to mind is actually something I'm working on right now that I'm going to be playing in wind ensemble later this semester, which is Viet Quang's chamber piece, Bullseye.
Okay, yeah.
Which is pretty recent. And this kind of goes back to what I was talking about with the technical writing. He really nailed it in this, and that's one of the aspects that I am having a lot of fun with in preparing it. So it's scored for a small chamber ensemble, and it's got a tango-like theme and klangfarbe and melody, where everything's all split up for most of the piece, and then it gets to, like, the big climactic moment, and it's loud and everyone's playing together. So, like, the trumpet and sax are playing one line, and the high woodwinds have a counter line, but it's not fragments where I'm playing for one beat here and one beat there. It's everyone has a full line of some sort. So it's got all these crazy descending scales that are so fast, where you're, like, ripping through it, like something that looks like, I looked at my part and said, is this not a woodwind part? This looks like a clarinet part. With all these things, it's just incredibly fast, and it has to, all the notes have to be there, and it can't kind of be faked.
Yeah.
But then I started working on it and realized that it's just written really, really well. It's in that comfortable register.
Yeah.
It's got pretty good fingerings for the most part, and it's actually it looks significantly harder than it actually is.
I love music that looks and sounds harder than it is.
It's written so well, and it's actually really fun to play now that I have it under my fingers, and I'm really looking forward to starting rehearsing it.
Yeah. That's my favorite.
And looking forward to everyone else's reactions when they see me ripping through that stuff.
Right, yeah.
And everyone's kind of like, why is the trumpet player doing that?
Yeah. That's so fun when composers really nail it. And, like, I'm working on this etude right now that's, like, all 64th notes, and I looked at it and I was like, no, And then as soon as I was reading it, I was like, oh no, this works under the fingers. This is nice. I like this. It looks and sounds really hard, but then it just like it clicks so well, and it's such a good feeling when that happens.
Yeah, you can really tell when somebody has spent a lot of time studying the instrument and figuring out how it works.
Yeah.
And this piece is definitely a good example of that.
That's so great.
And I'll try to think of other pieces that you use, like other aspects of the trumpet well, but the next thing, and more chamber music, is pretty much anything that Y Music has ever recorded or played
Yeah.
or have had written for them. So a couple of my favorites are 11 from the album that they did with Sunlux, Music in Circles by Andrew Norman, and Clearing Dawn Dance, I think is what it's called, by Judd Greenstein.
Yeah.
Those all are just beautiful pieces that I really enjoy, and have good trumpet writing, but everything that they do has good trumpet writing. And it's partially that the balance is just so perfect, which is a testament to C.J. Camerari, their trumpet player. He just has such control over the instrument and can blend in any setting. And he's actually played with Bon Iver, Paul Simon.
Oh wow.
In lots of different interesting arrangements. So he was the brass player for Paul Simon and did stuff where it's strings and him and Paul singing, and like trying to blend with that ensemble.
That would be wild.
And he actually also played. He's also a French horn player. He taught himself horn after college, I believe.
Easy, like we all
just
do.
to have something else to make him more hireable.
Yeah.
But he played horn on one of Taylor Swift's albums last year.
Oh wow.
I don't remember which song or which album, but
That's
I was surprised when I saw him in the credits of that.
Definitely.
But considering Justin Vernon was also on some of that, it makes a little more sense how he got in there.
Yeah.
So it's partially that he's just a fantastic trumpet player who can blend with anybody and has fantastic control. And it's partially the scoring, because it's all written for small horns. Like, not all of it, but for the most part, he'll play C and E flat a lot and use mutes a lot. And I know I said mutes weren't for volume, but it helps sometimes if you have the right mute in. It can just be easier to get a soft blending sound that fits with a string and woodwind ensemble. Or sometimes it's open where the trumpet just needs to soar over everybody. And there's moments like that. But even then, it's still so controlled and restrained. And it's just really fantastic writing and playing. And yeah,
That's so good.
I've had the pleasure of seeing them live twice.
Oh, that's amazing.
And because on recordings, it's one thing where it's not, they just sat down and did it, and they can obviously turn down one part where they need to.
Right.
But even hearing that group live and hearing him play, the trumpet's always there when it needs to be. And it's never covering everything else up. And he doesn't play so soft that it gets lost in everything. It's
so good.
Really impressive.
Yeah, I love, that's one of the things I'm missing most, is having that live music thing, because even listening to especially orchestral or ensemble recordings, it's it sounds so great, but you just know that it's been mixed and mastered within an inch of its life, partially because it makes it sound awesome, and it does, but also I want that I want the blend. Give me the blend.
Yeah, I definitely miss it too.
Yeah.
I got to play. I am lucky that I'm getting to do in-person performances this year, albeit in small chamber ensembles that are socially distanced. So I've been waiting for the day when I can play in a huge band.
Yeah.
Since this all started.
Yeah. Oh,
because that's the best thing.
Yeah.
And actually, speaking of huge band, I thought of another composer that wrote for the trumpet really well. Also one of my personal favorite composers, so maybe a little bit biased. But David Mislanka
Oh yeah.
wrote, I think maybe more so than anyone else, his music got away with a lot of things in the trumpet parts that a lot of people would say don't write that. And if you looked at the part out of context and gave it to a trumpet player, they're gonna say, "This should not be like no, just no." But the use of it within the ensemble and the orchestration is brilliant. So I've played his Second Symphony, and that's just scored for an enormous ensemble to begin with. There's 5 trumpet parts. Actually, 2 of them are for trumpets, and they double on piccolo trumpet a lot. It's actually written for trumpet and F.
Oh wow.
A little bit strange for a contemporary piece, because we don't really use those ever. So it just gets played on pick. And then 3 cornet parts. We didn't play them on cornet. It rarely happens, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But all those parts have divisi in them as well. I think one of them actually has a 3-way divisi, one or 2. So you're ending up with like 8-10 people in the trumpet section alone, and not by anything being doubled, but by necessity. So it's just massive ensemble.
I wish I could. Our undergrad ensemble was so small. Like we would, on a good day or a good semester, have 8 to 10 brass players.
I don't know. There's definitely good rep that makes the most out of having a few brass players.
It's true.
But
I don't think that the rep we chose was stuff that made use out of few brass players. We were always having to hire people in, and then it was a whole thing. But I want that big ensemble. I want to be back.
Yeah, that's just one of the best experiences I've had playing in band, and partially just because like that's all. Even though there's 8 or 10 of us in the section, everyone's part is just written to be important and to do different things, and there's really great solo moments, and our principal player nailed it and sounded amazing. And that was just really great writing, and being able to write a good trumpet solo in a band piece, especially something soft and melodic. The end of the first movement, it's like trumpet, really high E-flat clarinet, and then piccolo, I think. It's trumpet and high woodwinds in octaves.
Beautiful.
And it's beautiful, and it takes so much control. And then more of the technical writing. Maybe a little, and there are cases where technical writing has stuff that's just beyond the scope of what the trumpet can do, and intentionally so, because it's supposed to sound hard.
Yeah.
And like it catches your attention, and it's like, all right, the trumpets are here and they're playing the thing. It's not like a casual in the background thing. In the third movement, which is just blazing fast, there's this great fanfare lick where the entire section has it not in unison or octaves, but it stacks out thick harmony in like full chords with all 5 parts on a different note in the chord, and it's this it's this fanfare that repeats a few times, and everyone has it just like a third apart, and it's got these big leaps. It's like it's right after the trombones are coming out of this big thing with all these glisses, and it's all nasty, like it's all over the place, and they're all overlapping, and the trumpets just go and it's like this double tongued thing where your arpeggio is up and down, and the whole section's doing it together. The first part's way up high, and it's this. It just catches your attention. It's impossible to not just be like, all right, there's the trumpets.
Trumpets have arrived. Trumpets are in the building. Here we go.
And it's this hyper technical thing that the first part maybe is pushing what is reasonable to write for the trumpet. Maybe all the parts are. I'm not. Yeah. I don't know. I played it when I was a freshman, and I thought it was hard
Yeah.
then, and I might have a different outlook now.
Sure.
But
Oh, those freshman pieces. You're always like, was that hard? Like, do my friends hate me? Do I just need to take a nap? Like, is that hard, or was I just a child?
yeah, and there are certainly other pieces that Mislanka wrote that have hard trumpet parts. The Fourth Symphony has this piccolo trumpet bit during it's the big statement of Old Hundredth near the beginning of the piece, where it's in these different layers, and like most of the ensemble, the middle voices are playing the tune in big block chords, and then all the high woodwinds, piccolo, flute, E flat clarinet, one of the oboe parts, and then piccolo trumpet play this descant, where it's the same melody but in this really distorted rhythm with all these like quintuplets and stuff that stretch it out. So sometimes it comes in late and then catches up and then hangs out on a note for a while the other part's moving, and then the horns come in with the third, and the saxes come in with this third layer that does a similar thing to fill in the gaps between the phrases of the other two. But it's that same trumpet with all the high woodwinds scoring, and that's much harder than the solo at the end of the first movement of the Second Symphony. It's all the way up in the stratosphere on piccolo trumpet, like higher than you'd play in a Baroque concerto. It's up there, and it kind of has to sound pretty too. It can't be screaming piccolo trumpet over everything else. And that is hard. And that's one of those sections where if I took it out of context and showed it and looked at it, someone's gonna say, this is not acceptable.
No.
But in the full ensemble, it's perfect.
Yeah. That's awesome. So, speaking a little bit of like writing with instruments that you don't play or you're maybe less familiar with, I know you worked on this really cool miniature project over quarantine as a composer, and I was wondering if you could talk more about that.
Yeah. So it was a miniature project, but it was not a miniature project.
Sure.
It's actually still going. I am
Yay.
not finished with all of the pieces in the set. So a little bit of background on the project. The intent was to give people something to play while they were stuck at home, unable to make music with other people, in the form of mini commissions for solo instrument or voice at a low fee. It's actually was inspired a little bit by something that another composer, Salvador Alan Jacobo, did. This was a couple of years back, but it was, I'll write a solo for you for $10 for whatever instrument, whatever grade level style you want. It'll just be a short little thing. And I actually commissioned one for trumpet that was trumpety and hard, and one for flugelhorn that was just really pretty. Yeah. Because I liked that writing a lot and wanted more. So it was a little bit inspired by that, and I felt like it was an appropriate time to say, hey, I want to write music right now, so I can keep doing my thing, and I know everyone wants to play music, so they can keep doing their thing. So I'll write a solo for you for $15, and I wasn't expecting much. I put a post out on Facebook and shared it in some groups and said, hey, I'm doing this thing. If you're interested, send me a message and let's talk. And then like the first day, I had like 6 people asking me to write music for them. I was like, oh, this is significantly more than I was expecting. And I don't really, I was shocked. And I think that first batch was like clarinet, flute, trombone, trumpet, horn, drum set, or something close to that. So covering a huge range. And each of these being solos, right? That was not an ensemble. Yeah, they were all individual solos. Okay, yeah. Wow, what an ensemble that would be, too. It would be. I guess that might be my next project.
Hey, yeah. Just play all the miniatures at once. Easy, perfect.
Yeah, perfect. Although that might not work so well. The full project, once it's complete, will consist of 36 pieces that span pretty much every standard wind, brass, strings. I'm doing a couple for voice, and that drum set one.
Wow.
Was in there as well. So just I mean, talking about writing effectively for instruments I'm unfamiliar with, this is making me do all of them.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
And I'm not saying every composer should do this. It's a lot of music to write, and there were times when I just felt like I was completely out of ideas, and I was like, well, I'm just gonna have to sit here and say, all right, oboe piece. I don't have any oboe music, so
Right.
it'll sit here for a while until it comes to me, and it's hard. Both
Yeah.
the writing for instruments that I wasn't familiar with, and also just writing solos.
Yeah, definitely.
And I know it differs for every instrument. Like the trumpet obviously has some issues with endurance as a high brass. I got one for piccolo trumpet actually that was a lot of fun. Where I went with something a little bit more open-ended. It's all proportional notation.
Okay.
There's no rhythms. Every pitch just has a. I think I went with basically longest with an open note head, and then medium length is filled in, and then very fast is just grace notes that are beamed together. And I just followed the general spacing of the notes on the page and decide how long everything lasts, and
Cool.
put the rests where you feel they should be. Because I don't think there's any rests marked on the page either. It's just a bunch of notes in space, and it kind of helped cancel out that issue of piccolo trumpet is one of the hardest things in terms of endurance. It's just so taxing to play, or the other trumpet solos that I wrote, where as much as you want to write something that goes up high all the time and is loud and aggressive and all that, and it's sometimes it's just not realistic, and figuring out how to get around all those limitations, and with other instruments, what worked well and what didn't. Yeah, writing solos is hard, but I did learn a lot. Figuring out what all the things that every instrument
what literally
excels at
everyone can do.
Yeah, and especially with some of them, I got multiple commissions for an instrument. I have a lot of trumpet friends, so I got a bunch of trumpet solos. Maybe 6 are for trumpet, maybe less. And they're all different. There's the piccolo trumpet one. One of them is a little bit easier in terms of range and everything.
Yeah.
It has a lot more, more free gestures, and it's just nice, pretty music. One was actually a mirror duet.
Oh, cool.
The person who commissioned that one, he is interested in multi-tracking and doing that kind of recording. And I kind of wanted to factor that into his piece, and I kind of asked him beforehand, hey, do you have the capacity to multi-track yourself? And I didn't I tried not to let him know what I was getting at here. And he was like, yeah, what for? I was like, oh, just a trumpet ensemble arrangement that I'm going to recruit people for. And he's like, sure. And then I give him this piece that I called a duet for solo trumpet.
Oh, cool.
Because you can flip the pages over.
Yeah.
And then play a duet part that fits with it, which was interesting.
Oh, that's so fun.
In itself an interesting project to do, but and that was just something different that I could do.
Yeah.
Or there's one that's for cornet that's inspired by ska music.
Yeah.
With licks like that, and the other ones that I got multiple commissions for were horn and bass clarinet, actually, which are also super versatile instruments.
Yeah.
The first horn one that I did is based on an unsolved math problem relating to prime numbers, because most of them are for some reason. And it's a polyphonic study. It's based on a graph of said proposed function where it splits off into 2 tails. So I took that and just kind of said, well, what can I do with this? A polyphony for one person.
Yeah.
So you're playing a bass line and accompanying yourself.
That's so cool.
And so it's like this grooving thing, and then it gets broken up by playing a solo on top of it, and they alternate back and forth, and the bass line kind of goes away once you have it in your head, and it can be more of the solo, and then it comes back again a little bit different, and keeps going back and forth. That was a lot of fun. to take that aspect of the horn and go with it. Because I think the commission was for something a little bit more technical. That was kind of the intent. And the next one was something totally lyrical and expressive.
Yeah.
So I wrote this thing that it's kind of slow, and it's more or less the same theme a whole bunch of times in a row, in different meters and with different amounts of space in it. It's in like 7/4 and 9/4, and then like the last statement of it that's where it's going is in 11 actually.
Nice.
Because I wanted to.
Yeah.
And why not? So just stretching out an idea.
Right.
Like they wanted slow and pretty and expressive, and so I just
Yeah.
made it slower and prettier and more expressive every time it came around.
Yeah, definitely. So like I really resonated with what you were saying about the piccolo trumpet solo, where like you were able to like leave some of the technical issues of it up to the player, because like I think that there's a really cool thing that some modern music does, where it just sort of, it gives you the freedom to as a composer, to let the player do what they need to do in a way that like, versus I think in like more standard notation, you say do this and then they do that, versus you can be like here's what I'm going for, but you know your instrument better than I do, and like, you know, play it. Or even like, we both know how this instrument works, you do you, here's like the what I'm thinking of for it. And like, that's just, it's such a cool thing that like we have the ability to kind of share that control. It's really fun.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Kind of tangentially related to that, because my brain sort of spun out with that idea. I know that we've talked about this a lot in the past, but what are some of the biggest issues with the current level of accessibility in the music field? Like, sharing that responsibility for music making, and who gets to control what, and yeah, I know this is something we've talked about a lot, and I'm really curious as to your thoughts.
Yeah, my thoughts keep changing on this the more stuff that I'm exposed to, and the more opportunities and experiences I have. So recently I've gotten into electronic music, and I wish that I didn't have to say recently.
Yeah.
Just because that entire area of music is something that's not necessarily the most accessible.
Yeah, definitely.
I was never exposed to it in any form until I started college. I didn't know that there was electroacoustic music where you're playing with backing tracks or playing an instrument into live processing or anything. I didn't know any of that existed beforehand.
Yeah.
I had never heard any of it. I had never played any of it. It actually took me until this semester. This is the first time I'm ever doing anything like that, and I'm doing 2 pieces with electronics on my recital, one interactive and one with a tape part that you play back. Because most of the repertoire, for trumpet at least, is really, really difficult, or it has super demanding technical obligations for pre-performance, or just what you need in the hall to make it happen. There's one piece that someone compiled like a bibliography of existing trumpet and electronics music and talked a little bit about each, and one stuck out to me as something that I just don't see getting played, at least not by me or the people that I know, because you have to record 8 tracks of trumpet playing, demanding trumpet playing, that are all 8 to 9 minutes long, and then that's your backing track, and then you play that on stage and play a 9th part on top of it. So you're recording you're recording over an hour of music, and then learning another 8 to 9 minutes on top of that.
So much.
It's just so... Yeah. It's just so demanding.
Yeah. As a composer, I'm like, ooh, yeah, let's do it. But then as a player, I'm like, wait, but also, no.
So yeah, like I'd much prefer my electronic music that I play and write to go more the way of loop pedals and pre-recorded segments that the performer doesn't have to create, where they're able to do similar effects but without nearly the same demands put on the performer.
Yeah. Or like the first time I ever worked in an electronic medium was this summer, you and I doing the 48-hour challenge, where we had to write, like, it was a challenge for 48 hours, and you team up, and everybody in your group, so for us it was just the two of us, has to be involved in what was like the composing, the performing, and the editing, like the post
and the video too.
And the video, I think the video we added just for funsies because we finished early, possibly. But like that was the first time I'd ever worked in electronic medium, and it was so much fun because I felt like almost like the sounds that we made in the piece, in like what we recorded, were like almost like Legos, and then what we could do in like a digital audio workstation afterwards was like build the things with those Legos and transform them and make them from like these bits of sound to like, oh, this is a thing and this is cool. And like it was sort of a joke piece, but also I really loved the result, and like it was great. It was so much fun.
Yeah, I had a ton of fun with that project. It wasn't the first time I had done electronics, only because my Z Festival piece that I had written earlier in that summer was.
Yeah.
But that was the first time I had written anything.
Yeah.
Substantial with it, and I played around with a DAW and playing MIDI instruments into it and all that.
Yeah.
But it was my first time really controlling the output and putting it out there for other people to listen to.
Yeah.
Was my Z Festival piece Fini, where I put together the whole electronics track and had it mixed in with the live performance. But that was the first time I ever did anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I wish people could be exposed to.
Yeah, I was
earlier.
like, I really have a whole entire degree, and now the summer after graduation, it's the first time I'm ever playing around with, I was just like, this is so much fun, and it's so cool, and why have I never done this before? And
it's like, I'm in my last year
yeah.
of my degree, and I'm just now taking a class on Max.
Yeah.
And starting to get into interactive electronics, which I'm having entirely too much fun with.
Oh, me too. I literally just started with Max this semester too, and I'm like, oh, I'm thriving. This is so much fun. Like, let me build these sounds. We're thrive. Oh.
And especially with interactive electronics, I feel like there's some room to make more accessible music too.
Yeah.
Because you can do loop pedals and, well, I would say improvisation, but that's a whole different thing, because I feel like improvisation kind of has some of the same issues as electronic music in terms of people's exposure to it. Like, obviously, people who have a background in jazz are going to be comfortable improvising. But I didn't have that background. My high school did not have a jazz band. I never learned how to do it outside of school because I didn't really feel a need to. But even that doesn't even cover all music. There's improvisatory music that's definitely not jazz, and parts of pieces where we're asked to improvise. And a similar sort of thing with the electronic music. A lot of that repertoire, for me at least, is really hard as well with guided improvisation. It'll be like complicated chord changes. And just expecting you to solo over something. And I mean, there's a lot more that could be done with like, here's a pentatonic scale, go nuts.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to sound bad.
Yeah.
And it will be a much easier way to get people into and comfortable improvising in a piece. Or something that I did in a piece that I wrote like a year and a half ago for solo trumpet and percussion. In the last movement, which is for trumpet and drum set, and is supposed to be a little bit, not necessarily jazzy, but it's trumpet and drum set.
Yeah.
So it's not, it's not like classical.
Right.
But the trumpet part is mostly just stems with no note heads, and then fingerings, where you just do a fingering pattern over and over. And the piece is called patterns, actually, so it works out. But a lot of it, you just go first, second, open, and just go like that. And I don't care what notes you're playing, as long as you're doing those fingerings and playing in the rhythm that's specified. And I was hesitant at first. I wanted to write everything out and write a bunch of licks that use those patterns. And my teacher said, no. If you're doing this, why not just leave it up to the performer?
Yeah.
If you're already... Like, do the pitches matter, or is it the fact that it's the fingering patterns? And he was right. It's the pattern that matters instead of specifying everything. And
yeah. I also had an experience where I like having to let go of control was a big thing, where like I was also during the pandemic, I was doing things over Zoom, and I was saying like in my head made a lot of sense because I was like, I want to do live music, we can't do it in person, so I'm going to write a piece that incorporates latency. And then the first time I did that, I took it to rehearsal, and it was like my brain was just yelling because it was like, this isn't lining up, and I was like, no, it's not supposed to line up. But like it letting go of that control of like, oh, these are going to be the exact pitches, or this is going to be exactly the way it lines up. It's like it was very, very difficult, and I think just the exposure to that kind of not exactly indeterminacy, but also not indeterminate. I don't know. Musicians have too many words for too many things, but like that element of the performer is in control for some part of this, or another like Zoom is in control for some part of this piece.
Yeah.
Like
Now,
it's fun.
was that your Z Festival piece, or was that something different?
So that was actually, it was a piece I did for another festival earlier in the summer, where I had a bunch of different ways that. So like one of them, there were 4 movements. One of them was pre-recorded. One of them we just all got on one Zoom call and like played as best we could, which was similar to what we did with Z-Fest. One of them we opened up 4 Zoom calls, or four different calls at once, and it was like this multiplying effect that was like a digital orchestra, because like everybody had different amounts of latency on each different call, and like everybody's computer just like fully crashed, and it was so much fun. And then the other one was like, there were multiple calls, but like the violist called the bassist, who called the cellist, who called the violin, and the violin called me, and I was recording. So it was like different levels of filtering. And the setup for those was just horrible. Like it was not a good time to, like I had a great time because I had a great ensemble and we had fun. But like the actual just like sitting there and be like, no, you call on this platform, you have to call, and then your volume. Was
hey, we're trying to make music more accessible here.
I was experimenting, and it was not something I'll do again, but boy,
it sounds really cool. That actually reminded me. I guess I lied when I said the first piece I was playing with electronics was this semester, because for a festival I did over the summer after Z Festival was done, put on by one of our MSU composers. Mm-hmm. We all wrote solo pieces for each other and performed them, and the one that I got to perform was called Personal Meeting ID, I think was the name of it. So the setup of the piece was I had my laptop and my microphone, and then I set up a Zoom call between my laptop and my phone. And made feedback loops.
Nice.
And like moved my phone closer and farther from my bell and changed the gain on my microphone. So they were like both inputting and outputting and
cool.
Making all sorts of really strange sounds and doing feedback loop. But that just reminded me mini orchestra with 4 different calls going on simultaneously.
It was
made me think of that.
Pretty fun. But also very hectic, and like I ended up having to conduct it, and they had to like look at which call to watch me conducting, because like there was absolutely no sense of pulse without it. And not that I really wanted a sense of pulse, but at a certain point, like we all want to finish the piece within a minute of each other, probably. It's only like a 3-minute movement.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of responsibilities on everybody's part.
Yeah, it was like, I'm happy that I did it, and I'm happy that I got a really good group to do it with, because I think it could have really crashed and burned if people were not willing to like go on this adventure with me. It's not something I think I'll do again, because like even just like the amount of accessibility, it was very, very low accessibility in terms of performance. Like for one, you need to have a really strong Wi-Fi or a really strong internet connection, and not like so many people don't have that. Like it was a lot. It was a lot, and I would not put that much on performers again, I don't think, in the same way, because it was very, very inaccessible and in a way that I was not going for.
Yeah, that makes sense. Although I do have to say that your Z-Fest piece was just fantastic in the experience. It was so smooth. It was a really the experience of doing the piece was easy, and I didn't feel like it was inaccessible.
That makes me really happy to hear, because like I think I built upon the piece that I did that was very inaccessible and said, I think I would like a Zoom piece, but let's see how we can make it fun and easy to do instead of a big pain.
Right. And it was fun. Like,
I'm glad.
It was such an interesting experience of playing with people and not being there with them, and knowing that how it sounds to me is not what the final product is going to sound like.
Yeah.
And knowing that it's going to sound great either way.
Yeah. And I was really amazed working on, not to like only talk about my own music, but during the rehearsal process of that piece, I was shocked, frankly, with the way that all three of you learned to anticipate exactly what was happening. And like in my head, I was still struggling with like letting go of that control of the rhythm, and like I want to play live and therefore it's not going to be together. And then it was, after like 3 rehearsals. It was
exactly what you're talking about.
It was almost like watching people learn how to play chamber music, because you know when you're playing chamber music and you like have to know when you're taking the lead and when you're fading into the background and who you're following at what point, and then you learn to do that throughout latency, and I was like, what? How?
Well, there were moments where stuff just happened and it was perfectly together, and I'm sitting there like, how did we just do that?
Yeah.
I was either thinking that, or did everybody just hear that, or was that just a me thing? Like, did that just happen on my end?
Yeah, and like the amount of anticipation that was happening, and like I was not playing, so I didn't feel what was going on in like in your mind while you were playing without things happening together. But the final mix was pretty much rhythmically exactly as it was in a full score on the page. Which,
yeah, it was
like,
and I don't know how much editing went in behind the scenes to make that happen.
0.
No way.
100%. I took the Zoom recording of the Zoom audio, and I put it into my digital audio workstation, and I cleaned up a little bit of the background noise, and like turned it in. Like it was in time.
That's amazing.
And I fixed one vocal note, but like doesn't matter. It was astonishing how together it was. I was like, I don't know. It was just a very, very fun and amazing and interesting piece to work on. And I was so happy to work on it with 3 people who were just so willing to like mess around and try things out. And then oh my gosh, it was so cool.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun messing around and trying things out.
Yeah, and learning what original sound was all together, like. Oh, it was so good. So that kind of goes into like the next question that I was going to go on, is like, how can we improve the issues of accessibility, especially and I think like a lot of it is trying it out, you know, like.
Yeah, I actually I didn't actually consider this when I was thinking about these questions, but that piece that I did for solo trumpet and Zoom call, I guess, is kind of a thing that doesn't require that super complicated setup to have and perform. It's not something that requires you to have this perfectly controlled environment like a recital hall with a speaker here and a speaker here and a speaker here and a speaker here and a laptop here and a pedal here, and it's all hooked up to the stage, or it's all hooked up to like the audio controller that's in the recital hall, and making these beautiful sounds that are so finely tuned, and everything's in this particular space, and it's all sound. The sound isn't designed. There's no sound design when you're on a Zoom call with yourself making feedback loops and doing things with lag. It just doesn't exist. So finding ways to make music that don't need a setting to function is, I think, a really big way. I'm currently in the process of commissioning a piece from fellow trumpet player and composer Megan DeJarnett with the concept of doing an electronics track that can be used for like a controlled formal performance setting, but you can also just omit it and play the solo part as written in a casual setting if you don't feel like doing electronics. And kind of on a related note, like I said with the tech, just not having that complicated tech. we haven't really discussed details of what this is going to look like in terms of what you need to perform the electronics, but I don't anticipate it being very complicated.
Yeah.
And certainly not requiring you to get everything set up and placed perfectly, and you don't need to have 8 speakers all spaced out throughout the hall to give the audience this stereo surround sound coming at them from all angles. Like, if it's going to be something where it works with or without the electronics, and I hope that it'll be something that is also pretty accessible, even when you're using it.
Yeah, I've been thinking about writing a piece where it's for electronics and any instrument or voice, and I'm only writing the electronic part, and the idea is you get up on stage and you improvise along with the accompaniment that I've written, and it's the first time you're hearing it and you're performing it. And
I love that. That sounds like so much fun.
It's something that I've been toying with this idea for probably 3 or 4 years now and never got around to writing it. But now that I'm like, actually, because it was originally going to be for string quartet and any instrument. And I was like, meh, wasn't 100% resonating with the idea. But now that I'm getting into electronic music and I have that exposure that's like allowing me for this idea to like really, I was like, oh, this could work. This could really work. And I think it's also a really great way into this kind of new music world is, get up on stage, press play on your laptop, and go for it and see what happens. And I think a big part of like accessing these new forms of music is just play.
Yeah, I think
see what happens.
You're completely right on that. And with that, like, I think that even extends. Right now, obviously, it's weird because we don't have audiences, and it's sad that when you say, get up on stage, hit play, and start playing, that my mind goes to an empty recital hall with no one in the audience.
So did mine, stream. And that's not,
and it makes me really, really sad.
Yeah.
But thinking about how that would work with an audience in the hall, and you get to give something to them that they're not expecting, and they don't know what they're in for.
Yeah, and neither do you.
And I've been to a few performances on some of our premieres concerts here with the Electronic Music Workshop, where it's all improvised. So one of them, there was a video score that everyone was reacting to and improvising to, and some are just full improvisation. But I think that's a super interesting thing.
Yeah.
And kind of along with like the audience connection and giving them something. An idea for a piece that I would really like to make happen in some way at some point is something where it's not necessarily only the performers improvising and the audience gets to be part of that as well.
Yeah.
Outreach is like a really big thing for chamber ensembles. Outreach educational performances, and like a lot of chambers do have a lot of engagements that aren't in such a formal setting, and I think music specifically designed for that is a really interesting avenue that is probably a little bit underexplored.
Yeah.
There's some band stuff that does it. Jim Stevenson has this great thing called Compose Yourself for band, and I don't know if it's necessarily got like audience participation, but it's this very free-form thing that you put on in a less formal setting.
Yeah.
I think of educational concert music.
Yeah, audience engagement can be so important, especially for like those sort of community engagement, like gigs and programs, and I think that's a really great way to like go about bringing new music into like, not just the public eye, but into like, I don't know, like not having it be music that only music majors can appreciate.
Right, like
it's like that's the stereotype, right? For like, oh, why are you writing music if only scholars or people that have your degree can appreciate it? And it's like, I don't want to be. I write it because I think it's cool, and
and that actually
break through. Oh, yeah, it's a thing.
That actually is something that I was also going to talk about. Was shifting the window of people who appreciate this type of music to people who listen to music.
Yeah,
one of my colleagues here at Michigan State, Evan Ziegel, is writing a piece for trumpet and heavy metal band.
Love it.
Called Omen.
That's so cool.
Pre-recorded backing track, and I think he performed most of it. He plays bass as well. I think.
So fun.
I think it's bass. Probably plays guitar also, but I'm not 100% sure. But because he's posted clips of recording the metal band parts in. It's being written for one of the doctoral students in trumpet here who also really likes heavy metal.
Yeah.
And it's going to have some improvisation and all the things. Like, if you want, you can do some effects with the trumpet part as well. And it's just this really, really great thing, because I think what makes it great is that it's taking two things the audience recognizes already.
Yeah.
Heavy metal and the trumpet. And you're putting them together in a setting that's new. No one's ever heard a piece of trumpet music with a heavy metal band backing it. But it's got familiar elements, and you get what's going on.
Yeah.
You can show that to any person. Like, there are things I couldn't show Fini to a random person, the Z Festival piece. I couldn't show them that and be like, I made this thing. What do you like it? They'd probably be like, I don't know. It's why are you talking about sunsets and there's like a music box?
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, sure, but if you show someone a heavy metal band with a killer trumpet part with like crazy solos all over it, they're gonna get it at least, and just, I don't know.
Yeah, I get that. I'm always like
expanding what, so because it doesn't have to be, because I don't know, some people, when they think electronic music, their mind just jumps to weird, and that's the first thing is
or techno, and like either way,
that too. It's either this is gonna be weird or it's EDM,
right?
And neither of those are a bad thing.
Sure,
but just moving what audiences and performers as well think of the art form,
and also and what they consider to be weird, because like, I don't know, every piece of music I've ever heard has just fallen out of my head, so I can give no examples, but like there's some pieces where I'm like, this is like, if I did not have like the experiences that I've had with the new music, I would think that this is really strange and really weird and out there and electronic and funky. But like now I'm like, actually this is a groove and I really like this, and this slaps.
Oh, for sure. I mean,
like Pamela Z is somebody who I think falls really well into that, where I just think her music is like, of course it's amazing and it's such cool compositions, but also I think that like if more people listen to it, it would not be seen as like avant-garde or like crazy out there. And I think she's doing such great work and it is really revolutionary, but also it should be appreciated by so many more people because it's so cool.
Yeah, I definitely think both getting more people to appreciate it, and like finding, I think the two kind of go hand in hand, like making the music that is easier for people to just listen to and understand, as well as bringing it to wider audiences. Like, I've got an electronics piece in the pipeline for probably this summer, for my girlfriend actually. She likes birds, so it's going to be a clarinet solo with electronics, and it's going to have bird sounds in it, and it's going to be like playing bird noises on the instrument, bird noises in the electronics, and no one's going to listen to that and think this is weird. No, it's a piece about birds and it sounds like birds.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I'm not saying we need more of that necessarily, but just making something where the audience is already familiar with some aspect of it, beyond there's an instrument that I vaguely recognize and it
has been distorted beyond all repair, and
like just finding any kind of sense of familiarity. I think that goes a long way. Yeah,
and I think familiarity is like the biggest tool we have to increase that accessibility to new genres, to new forms, to new ideas. And yeah, I think that's great. So then, kind of going off that, just sort of wrap up kind of a question. With that, should the strategies in improving the accessibility in these areas and improving the understanding, should they be different in different areas of the classical field, or like electronic versus improvisation, or and how do you see that working?
I mean, I don't think they really have to be different. They can be, just because of the fields themselves. Like, you're not going to have restrictive performance necessities, like recording 8 tracks of a piece before performing it in improvisatory music. It's just not a thing that's gonna. It's usually just not a thing that's gonna exist.
Right.
I'm not putting out of the question for someone to write that, where the solo part that you play on stage is all improvised as well, and then that's just a lot of work in every aspect. I'm not putting it past anyone, but for the most part, like those requirements obviously aren't there. But I think a lot of it can be similar. There is a lot of overlap.
Yeah.
Just finding things to tie down the music.
Yeah.
To both performers and audiences. Like, as a performer, if I was playing, I still am yet to perform anything with interactive electronics other than that Zoom thing.
Right.
But like, I've never done anything where you have microphones going into a max patch or like a tech setup on stage, and it is still honestly intimidating.
Yeah.
The first thing I play with that is going to be something that I write.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to have to worry about getting it the way the composer wants and getting every little thing. But just finding, like, and that, for me, that's what's going to tie it down, is that I'm comfortable because I wrote it. But if you asked me to play something where I have a microphone set up and I'm like playing into it, or my newest toy is a mute that has an electronic pickup in it already, so that I can get a digital sound without having, and I can like pipe it out without having feedback, because the microphone's in my bell and only picks up the trumpet. Like if I had to play that into a max patch that was doing things and set all the speakers up and have all the files, and if I need to like preload samples, like I would be intimidated and I would be scared of getting it wrong in the performance and not making a fool out of myself, but technology happens.
Right.
Because there's nothing to tie it down, but finding all those things, whether it's, instead of that, the thing I'm playing with is heavy metal or bird noises.
Yeah.
Or something that's supposed to be unpredictable, like the Zoom, the Zoom call between two of your own devices, finding ways to tie it down. And then for improvisation, I think that also really can tie in with maybe not necessarily something familiar with like a style or genre, but other disciplines of music. You can certainly tie in there as well. Like, I think it'd be really great to do a piece where the ensemble's maybe improvising, or just one player even, but they're not necessarily making it up out of their head. It's something that someone else wrote and gave to them and said, this is what you're playing here. Like, imagine a piece where you've got an ensemble, and this might fit with the outreach and education, where you have people in the audience who are going to be there, like, come up with something. Really, it can be really simple and short, like 4 notes. They come up with it ahead of time and show up at the concert, and they give it to you and say, okay, this is what I wrote for you. Yeah. And this is what you're going to play here. And then they improvise based on that framework, but just give them some kind of starting point. And I think that's beneficial to everybody. As a composer, you get to maybe do less of the work yourself, and you say, all right, someone else is going to write the music here. There
was a piece, so I shared my junior comp recital with a friend, and one of the pieces that he was doing was going to be for alto, or for solo flute, and it was going to be performed by me. So I said, don't worry about it, just get it to me, like, I don't need it like months in advance, just get it to me before the recital, whatever, I'll do it. I'm also just like, I'm a great sight reader, so like, you know, I don't care, just get it to me before the recital and we'll make it work. And what that piece ended up being was, during intermission, he said, here are my 3 ideas for the piece. And I walked out on stage and I put a blank sheet of paper on a music stand to make it look like he had given me music. And I played those ideas. And it was great. It was like, I don't know, it was maybe one of the best things I've ever played. It was so cool. It sounded amazing. What? And I was improvising the whole thing, just like thinking about what he had told me. And like, it was great. It was so much fun. And it was a really, really freeing way to work. And so happy with the result, even though it was just both of us procrastinated and it didn't end up happening. But the result was great.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much exactly what I was thinking. Like, as a performer, it's so much less intimidating to say, this is the general sense of what I'm supposed to be doing when I improvise. Yeah. And then I can go from it. Like, it doesn't even have to be complicated. Like, it could be pitch material. It could be someone says, okay, my idea is a rhythm where you're just repeating the same note and speeding up through it. Yeah. Or slowing down. And like, I could improvise a whole lot based on just that, and do a whole lot and because it wouldn't matter what I'm doing with the pitch, it's their idea was the rhythmic thing, and that's what I'm thinking about, and it's simple.
Yeah.
I think it and for the audience as well, just helping them feel like they're part of the process instead of they're sitting here and having new music played at them.
Yeah.
When it's not, when it should be, they're sitting there and they're participating in new music.
Definitely.
Because just by going to see new music, you're supporting it and participating, because it's not everybody's choice of first choice of things to listen to and do, but maybe the people that feel less strongly about it. I'm sure the people who watch my recital this spring, there's going to be some hesitation with some of the things I'm playing, and people aren't really going to know what's going on. But I mean, I don't know. I don't think I've ever dragged anyone to a new music show before, but if someone ever got dragged to a show but then the audience was participating in the music making, even if they personally weren't doing anything and hadn't written a snippet to improvise on or whatever beforehand, just the knowledge that other people in the audience are part of that process, I think really makes it feel just a lot more of like it's one environment that performers, composers, and audience are sharing, rather than the stages where backstage is where the composer usually lives, and then the performer does their thing and the audience
receives it.
Audience is an audience to it.
Right.
Receives
it. I think that's a really powerful tool. Well, thank you so much for joining us here at Classical Schmassical. If you at home enjoyed the show, there is definitely plenty more where that came from, so do make sure to like and subscribe so that you never miss an episode. If you would like to continue the conversation on trumpet, composing for lots of different instruments, or accessing new forms of music and kind of making that a little bit more open, please do join the Discord linked in the description, or visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/classical schmassical. That's schmassical, SCHMASSICAL. And remember, as always, stay classy and questionably classical.